Hello and welcome to a brand new day of free-to-play here on Magic the Gathering Real Life. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. So, it's time to wrap up the last section of Defense of Veldmar. This is the second expansion of Veldmar block. So if you missed the first one, links in the description below. And if you missed the lead up to here, links in the description below for all of that too. We've been through every section. Now, finally, we're on to artifacts and lands. We're going to start things off with Ancient Destroyer. This is a 9-mana artifact creature golem. It's an uncommon 8/9. It has Bulwark 3, Rampage 3, and Trample. Bulwark 3 means that whenever it attacks, it gets +0/+3 until end of turn. So it would attack as an 8/12. Rampage 3 means for each creature that blocks it beyond the first, it gets +3/+3 until end of turn. And so it attacks as an 8/12 trampler. If two things blocked it, it would pump up to an 11/15 trampler. And for everything that blocked it beyond that, it keeps getting bigger. Bulwark's a new keyword ability. Rampage is an old keyword ability. And it says, when Ancient Destroyer dies, destroy target permanent. So this is a giant end-game threat. You can build up to in the limited format. There is a mythic rare card that can let you pull artifact creatures straight out of your library to the battlefield. In the previous set, there was also a card for the Roka Guild, that's white, red, green, where it could sacrifice golems to pull artifact creatures straight out of the library as well. So, there's a couple of ways in the format to trick this into play, and even if you're not doing any of that, there are some good ramp pieces that exist in the format. It takes a dedicated effort to get to 9 mana, but I think it's doable. So, for limited, I think this card is playable for the right deck. So, if you are in that deck, where you have the means to get it out of the library, then I think this is a totally reasonable late game play. Could even be a draw to pull you into the deck in the first place. And in that case, could be as good as the 3.5. For everyone else, it's almost impossible to cast it. 9 mana is a lot. So for everyone else, I think this card's probably about a 1. Ancient Mana Crystal. This is a 2-mana artifact. It is a rare. It enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps to add 1 mana of any color. So this is a great little mana rock. It's not as powerful as some old mana rocks that see play in Commander, like maybe Felwar Stone or some of the original talismans. I think they were from Mirrodin. It does make mana of any color though, and if you were considering it for a format like Standard, this would be really strong. It's like a rampant growth that can be in any color. So, coming into play tapped is at least a little bit of a check on its power. I think it is fair, but it's very, very good. In limited, I think if you are 2 or more colors, this basically always makes the cut. So in that regard, I mean, heck, I think it's like a 4. Ancient Prism. This is a 0 mana artifact, so it could up your storm count in some older formats. It's a common artifact. You can pay 2 and tap and add 1 mana of any color. So this is a really straightforward mana filter. Now the fact that it costs 2 mana means that it's not that great, but it costs about the same amount to activate this as it does the common lands you see about every set now, where you pay 1 and tap, and the land adds a mana of any color. You have to tap 2 lands in order to do that, which is the same ratio as this card. Now this card does have more of a cost, because it's not a land in and of itself. So in Limited, I would say you would run this on occasion if you are badly in need of some mana fixing. I think it's not great, but can do the job in a pinch. So, you know, I guess you'd call it kind of a sideboardy card most of the time, like a 0.5. In Constructed, 0 mana artifacts can, up your storm count. And in a deck like that where you're producing a lot of excess mana, having the ability to use this to filter probably won't come up, but it could come up. So it has an outside shot at seeing play in a storm deck or something, or maybe Affinity. Antiquated Golem. This is a 5/5 artifact creature golem for 6. It's a common, and that is it. It's a vanilla creature. So I put a cycle of vanilla creatures across each of the monocolors, and this is the one for colorless. It does do a couple of good things. Being an artifact, it helps out with the Roka Guild being a 6-mana creature. It actually can serve a purpose for the Ulthrak. That's black, red, green. They care about creatures that cost 6 or more. So this is a reasonably well-positioned vanilla creature for Limited. So since it can go in any color, and since it has a couple of synergies it can fulfill, this card might be like as much as a 1 or a 1.5. And this is a slower format, so I think you can actually get to this 6-mana card. Astrolabe. This is a 3 colorless artifact common. It's a reprint. Pay 1 and tap, sacrifice Astrolabe. Add 2 mana of any one color. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So, in a roundabout way, this can give you a little burst of mana on the turn you activate it, assuming it's not the turn you played it. So on some future turn, when you sacrifice it, you go up 1 mana in the process. It also replaces itself with a card. It's not amazing, but since it can give you back some of the tempo you lost playing it in the first place, it replaces itself with a card, and it's a mana fixer for, a 3 and 4 color format. I think this will see some amount of play in Limited. So, it's a pretty forgettable card, kind of in the 1.0, 1.5 range, but once in a while, it'll see some play. Barbed Sextant. This is a 1 mana artifact, uncommon. It is a reprint. Pay 1 and tap, sacrifice Barbed Sextant. Add 1 mana of any color. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So we have another mana filter artifact here, sacrifices and replaces itself. This one, the cost is right, the price is right. So just being a little 1 mana play that then on the turn you choose to filter with it is mana neutral, and it replaces itself with a card. All of that is pretty reasonable. I think this stands a little bit better shot of seeing play than Astrolabe does. So we'll call this card like a 1.5. You're never excited to run it, but it is a piece that smooths out the game for you if you need it. Brass Servant. This is a 2 mana artifact creature construct. It is a 1/1 common. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So this is pretty great. It's not quite as good as drawing the card immediately, but it's something that gives you a body on the field, replaces itself with a card draw, helps to dig towards your next land drop, In limited, that is a big deal. So this helps smooth out the game for you while giving you a little bit of battlefield presence in the meantime. And then it's something later you can sacrifice or can work towards your artifact synergies. It just does a lot of little stuff that adds up to being very useful in the early game. So it might not look like much, but I think this card's actually probably at least a 2. Crystal Prison. This is a 5 mana artifact. It's a common. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature. That creature's controller creates a 2/2 colorless reflection creature token. And then you can tap this to add colorless, or add 1 mana of any of the exiled creature's colors. So just to be clear, they never get the original creature back. That thing is gone. Gone for good. Even if they remove it in response, you still can tap this thing for colorless mana. So this is an interesting piece of removal, and it's also a little bit of mana acceleration. And there are a couple of factions like the Ulthrak, and I would also argue your 4-color factions, that's the Consortium, everything but green, and the Far Realm, everything but white. And then the Ulthrak. All of those go big. Getting to 6 and more mana can matter for those. So this could probably be pretty decent there, and just in general, it is a reasonable piece of removal. It's not exciting, but it's one that any color can use, and the exile can be important sometimes. So I think this card rates at least a 2. Doom of the Tolgath. This is a 10 mana rare. It's a 10/10 legendary artifact creature, Kraken. It has Menace, Trample, and Rampage 4. So, whenever it becomes blocked, it gets +4/+4 until end of turn for each creature blocking it beyond the first. Doom of the Tolgath does not untap during your untap step. Sacrifice a land. Untap Doom of the Tolgath. Whenever Doom of the Tolgath attacks, each opponent sacrifices an artifact, a creature, a land, and a planeswalker. So this card is ridiculous. There are ways in the format to ramp. I didn't mention before, but the Quintessence tokens of the colorless Thune faction can also give you a burst of extra mana. So there are various ways to try to get up to 10, or being an artifact creature, there are ways to fetch it out of the library. So it's not impossible that you can get up to this mana, or in some way get this out in a limited game. So if you get this on the board, and it survives to attack once, then the attack trigger is going to wreck the opponent. I would also add that the does not untap, sack a land to untap can sneakily be useful in this format because there are a number of ways to tap something and put stun counters on it. You can machine gun the stun counters off of this and get it untapped and swing again by sacking a bunch of lands. And, no one wants to sacrifice a bunch of lands, but at the same time, if you're attacking with a 10/10 trampler that's making them sacrifice their board, that's probably worth it. So, it's a giant, ridiculous creature, but there are decks that could put it to use, and for those that can, this card's got to be up towards a 4.5. If you can actually get this on the board, it is ridiculous, and you will win the game. If you don't have the means to get this out, then kind of like what I said about the 9 mana card, but even more so, 10 is that much further out of reach. If you can't get there, it might be more like a 0. So, big divide on how playable this is. Could have a shot in constructed, whether you're like reanimating it, tricking it into play, or just ramping up to it. Ebony Rhino. This is a reprint from Homelands. This is 7 mana. It's an uncommon 4/5 artifact creature Rhino. It has trample. That's it. So this card is basically terrible. It's very below rate. Even when it came out in Homelands, it wasn't great. Time has not been any kinder to it. So it's here as a reprint because it fits with the storyline of the Ancients and the Tolgath, which were the factions that fought sort of before recorded history on Homelands. Like Grandmother Singier, her name was Ravi. She's the one who rung the apocalypse chime to end the war between the Ancients and the Tolgath. Ebony Rhino was a relic from that time. So I thought it made sense that it should show up here where they're uncovering artifacts that were designed by the Ancients for their war with the Tolgath. So this is a bad card, which you should basically not play, including in limited. Maybe if you have a lot of synergy, like a lot of ways to pull artifact creatures out for free, or there's a land that lets you play 2 mana for colorless spells that cost 7 or more. If you have a critical threshold of stuff that synergizes just the right way, then it could turn this from being unplayable to middling. It's not quite a 0 though. This is like perpetually a 1. You know, any deck might get up to 7 mana, and a 4/5 is not nothing. So even though it's bad, it never quite reaches the level of being a 0. It's always like a card you don't want to play, but you could. Far Realm Terraformer. So this is a weird one. It's a 1 mana artifact. It's a common. It has the activated ability, tap, banish 1. That's exile the top card of your library. Target wastes, or snow-covered wastes you control, becomes an island, swamp, mountain, forest in addition to its other types until end of turn. So it can make blue, black, red, or green. Those are the colors of the Far Realm. It's a 4-color faction. You can also pay 1, tap, and sacrifice this artifact and create a quintessence token. And that is a colorless enchantment token, and you can sack it to make a colorless, or you can pay 2 generic and sack it to draw a card. So this can be a mana fixer if you have wastes in your deck. Even if you don't, you can sort of cycle this thing to get a quintessence token, which then can ramp you on mana, or it can draw you a card. So it's like a little helper piece that can smooth out the game for you. Whether you're just, cycling through the deck like a cantrip, or if you have some wastes, then this can be a mana fixer for you. It can trigger a number of different synergies that exist in the format. It's like a forgettable card that's kind of vaguely on par with Barbed Sextant in some ways. So I'm going to rate this about the same, like a 1.5. Labyrinth of Mirrors. This is a 4-mana rare artifact. Whenever an opponent attacks, if they attacked you, a battle you defend, and or a planeswalker you control, Create a 2/2 colorless reflection creature token. This card actually encourages not attacking. It might be good enough to see constructed play. I think it would be like a fun card for Commander and such. In terms of constructed play, the first creature it makes you is like a 2/2 for 4, and the second one is like a pair of 2/2s for 4. At that point, it's still not to the level of a constructed card. At the point it's helped repel 3 attacks against you, and it's made 3 2/2s, that's when I think you're getting real value out of the card. In Limited, I think this is a bomb. I'm going to rate it a 5 in Limited. That's how strong I think this card is in a Limited game. It's not that you can't play around it. You absolutely can. The opponent can stockpile a board, go wide, fly over the top. There are ways the opponent can try to play around this card, but it's pretty backbreaking and limited. So there's only so many of this kind of effect that you can print in a set before the game gets gummed up and it's too hard to attack anymore. But I went ahead and made this card as an interesting effect you don't see very often in Magic. Levitating Platform. This is 2 mana for a rare artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you banish 3. Let's exile the top 3 cards of your library. You can pay 1 and tap and put one of the exiled cards in its owner's graveyard and create a treasure token. So that's cool. You can fill up the graveyard and make treasure. You can pay 2 and tap and put one of the exiled cards into its owner's hand. So in that mode, this is kind of like, a Reckoner Bankbuster, Maze Mind Tome, where it's drawing you cards. They're face up. You get to see them, so you know which one you're going to draw. And then you can pay 8 colorless and return Levitating Platform to its owner's hand. It's very expensive, but it has a built-in way to reset itself to give you this card advantage all over again. I think this artifact is going to be a workhorse, both for constructed and for limited. So I think I would rate this easily like a 4.5. Mana Crystal Mine. 3 generic. It's a rare artifact. At the beginning of your end step, banish 1 and create a Power Stone token. So if you're not familiar with the Brothers War, a Power Stone is a colorless artifact token named Power Stone with tap, add colorless. This mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. So if it's a spell, it has to be an artifact, but otherwise, activated abilities, triggered abilities, whatever else you can spend mana on is fair game. There are a lot of artifacts in the set, so for example, if you have some things like the giant artifact creatures we saw earlier, you could pick this up in draft and make a bunch of Power Stones and you'll be ready to cast your Doom of the Tolgath or whatnot later in the game. Could be a little slow for constructed. They're not tapped when they come in, so you could theoretically use it right away, probably for an activated ability. If you can really get all the bang for your buck, then maybe it could have a shot in constructed. This is also great for the Roka Guild, white, red, green. They care about the count of artifacts that they have. So this is going to be fantastic for them. Overall, if you have the right synergies in your deck, then for limited, I'd say this could be a great card, which is as much as like a 4. If you're not in that deck, then it doesn't do anything for you, and it's like a 0. Manalith. This is a reprint. 3 mana. It's an uncommon artifact. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. That's it. So, Wizards has gone back and forth over the years on how good or bad to make a 3-mana rock. Around the time I started playing at Mirrodin, that's when we had cards like Darksteel Ingot. So my baseline was already pretty high for what I expected of a mana rock when I first started playing. Then they got worse for a while, to like the level of Manalith, and now they're swinging back around to being pretty strong again. We saw the Celestis a few sets back. Usually there's some kind of upside, and sometimes it's a really strong upside. I went with a basic one here because things are not supposed to be that easy on Veldmar, at least not for the first couple sets. Wastes of Veldmar, you're facing down the Apocalypse. In this set, there's the invasion of the Far Realm and Thune. So this is serviceable. I'm sure it will see some play. It's a 3 and 4 color format. So the ramping and fixing is needed. And I think this card will be better than this type of card is sometimes in Limited. Sometimes this is a really forgettable card in Limited if it's a fast, tempo-oriented kind of format. I don't think this is. So I would say Manalith is more in the range of a 2.5 in this format. Storage Cube. This is 4 mana. It's an uncommon artifact. When it ETBs, you gain 4 life and draw a card. You can also pay 4, tap, and sacrifice it. You gain 4 life and draw a card. Pretty straightforward. I think the costs on this are fair. I think it's probably just outside of constructed playability. Like, it's right on the cusp. It's right on the borderline. I think 4 mana is just a little bit too much to see constructed play. But for Limited, I think this is going to be great in Limited. So it can't find you your lands on turn 2, but this is a piece that helps to bridge you from the mid-game into the late game. And if that's the kind of deck you've made, Storage Cube is going to be great. So I would say this card's probably right around 2.5. I think it's going to be quite nice most of the time in Limited. Trove of the Ancients. This is an 8 mana legendary artifact. It is mythic rare. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 6/6 colorless worm artifact creature token with trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, search your library for an artifact creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So this is the aforementioned way to pull artifact creatures right out of your library. If you get this in Limited, I think it's worth the trouble to try to get to 8 mana. This would be like a strong pull to make your deck capable of casting it. It gives you a 6/6 trampler right away, and then every turn for the rest of the game, you can get a free artifact creature out of your library. And there are big artifact creatures, not just in colorless, but in the colors as well. So, since this is a strong pull into, turning your deck into the right archetype, I would say this card's probably really good in the format, probably worth the trouble the majority of the time. I'm tempted to give it a 4.5. It does require a bit of setup. Yeah, I'm still going to call it a 4.5. I think it is terrifically strong. That was it for artifacts. Now we're on to the lands. This is Consortium Mana Station. It is a reprint from the last set. So if you saw Wastes of Veldmar, I put the land in here again because I thought it was a good piece to smooth out the game. So you gain a life and surveil 1 when it enters. You can tap for colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it to add white, blue, black, or red. The colors of the consortium. So these kind of lands have been useful and limited. Often they'll have like a scry or a surveil and tap to make a mana of any color. This one only makes 4 colors of mana, but you gain a life. I think if you have 2 or more of these colors in your deck, then it's gonna make the cut. It's just a question of how highly you pick it up. If you are the consortium, this card's probably like a 3.5. It's something that you absolutely need. For other decks, it's nice to have fixing lands like this. It's like a 2.5. Contaminated Aquifer. So this is the common tap dual cycle that I've decided to use for Veldmar block. So they appeared in Wastes of Veldmar. They're reprinted from Dominaria United. I chose them because they have the basic land types, and that synergizes with some of the cards of the set. And they'll appear again in Growth of Veldmar. So, they're nothing special, they're not exciting, but they enable, good multicolor decks to exist. And there are cards that can hit, like a card with a basic land type. That doesn't have to be basic. So, these cards are just like bread and butter linchpins of limited play. They're all probably right around a 2.5. Far Realm Guildhall. So this continues a cycle that was started with 1 land in the prior set with the Consortium Guildhall. It's a rare land, enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for colorless. You can also tap it for blue, black, red, or green, and activate this ability only if you control no planes. So, the 4-color factions want you to play with 4 colors, but not 5 colors. They're trying to hold their own identity as their own separate thing away from a 5-color deck. And so this is like a guardrail mechanic. As for the land, if you don't have white in your deck, then this is great. This is great fixing. So, I think rate's about a 3 in limited. If you don't have white, it's pretty sure to make the cut. Far Realm Mana Station. So this continues a cycle from the Consortium Mana Station. It's an uncommon land. When it enters, you gain 1 life and surveil 1. Taps for colorless, or you can pay 1 tap and it makes blue, black, red, or green. So this is another 4-color mana filter land. And it's got the gain 1, surveil 1. Again, if you're in the right color grouping, this card could be as good as like a 3.5 for you. Otherwise, it's still like a useful card to smooth out the game, and probably rates at least a 2.5 for most decks. Far Realm Monolith. So this continues the rare land cycle that started with Wastes of Veldmar with the Consortium Monolith. It's a rare land, it taps for colorless. You can also tap and pay 2 life and add blue, black, red, or green. As long as you control a planes, this ability costs an additional 2 life to activate. So don't do that. Don't control a planes. Just stick to the 4 colors, not 5. If you do that, then this is a pretty serviceable land. Comes into play untapped. It does cost a lot of life to use it, but you've always got the colorless mode available. And if you don't have access to the colors otherwise, you'll be glad you have it. So, overall, pretty great land. Probably will see some constructed play. For limited, I think it's also probably going to see a good amount of play most of the time. I'll give it a 2.5. Geothermal Bog. This is part of the 10-card cycle. I'm just going to highlight these for a second on the screen to show you the art. So if you want to, take a moment, you can pause the video when I highlight these lands. Otherwise, I'll just say its name and keep going. Haunted Mire, Idyllic Beachfront, Incinerator. This is reprinted from Wastes of Veldmar. I felt like this card did such a good job of playing into the themes of the set, and being like a mana fixer that costs you something in the process, that I thought it was worth reprinting here. So it's an uncommon land, taps for colorless. You can also tap and sacrifice a permanent and add 1 mana of any color. So if you really need a particular color, you can get it. Even if it costs you sacrificing a land, you can get that color. If you're in a deck that's got some spare tokens, like trash tokens, artifact tokens, creature tokens, then this will be pretty great. If you're not in a deck with a lot of spare tokens, it won't be as good. So I'd say this card kind of ranges between like a 3.0 and a 1.5. Landfill. I also reprinted this from Wastes of Veldmar. Again, I felt like it just fulfills its roles so well that it was worth reprinting. It's uncommon land, enters the battlefield tapped, taps for colorless. At the beginning of your upkeep, banish 1 and create a trash token. So it's eating away at your library over the course of the game, but it's also making you a bunch of free artifact tokens. So this card obviously pairs well with Roka. They care about artifacts. There's also Zarnik, white, blue, green. They care about trash tokens and self-banish cards. So this one is even better for Zarnik. And then, it plays well with cards like Incinerator and stuff. So it's just really handy card. Depending on how much it synergizes with the deck, depends on whether or not you want to play it on turn 1. You might not want to banish that many cards if it doesn't synergize that well. Might wait till a little later in the game. Otherwise, yeah, I think this card does a lot for you. So, for its high synergy decks, I would say this card's at least a 3.5, maybe a 4. For everyone else, it's still useful, and I'd give it like a 2. Molten Tributary, Radiant Grove, Sacred Peaks, Sunlit Marsh, Tangled Islet, Thune's Monolith. This is a rare land. It taps for colorless. It can also tap for 2 colorless. Spend this mana only to cast colorless spells with mana cost 7 or more. So, this is obviously like encouraging you to play Eldrazi, that kind of thing, but it also synergizes well with the giant artifact creatures and artifacts of the format. So, as long as you have some giant colorless spells in the deck, then this could be worth your time. Veldmar Vista. So this is a rare land. You can tap it to add colorless, or you can tap and put a stun counter on it and add 1 mana of any color. So this harkens back to some lands. I think they were first printed in Ice Age that wouldn't untap, and then they made a cycle in Champions of Kamigawa or thereabouts that did something similar. So since this is a 3 and 4 color format, a land that can tap for any color of mana and can come into play untapped is pretty valuable. You've always got the colorless mode, and if you really need it, you can get access to the color you need. I think this card is basically an auto-include for almost any deck in the format. So, It's not amazing, but it's fair and it's very good. So I'm gonna rate it like a 3.5. Wasteland Cache. This is an uncommon land. Enters the battlefield with a dig counter on it. Taps for colorless. You can pay 1, tap, and banish 1. Add 1 mana of any color. And you can also pay 3, tap, remove a dig counter. Create a 1/1 white human creature token and a treasure token. So, unless you're proliferating, you can only remove the dig counter once. But after that, it can still continue to filter mana for you. The banish is mostly a drawback. It could be a little bit of a benefit if you're Zarnik, though. White, blue, green. But being able to make a human and a treasure as a one-time thing, that's pretty nice. That can not only fix your mana, it can also ramp your mana. And having access to a chump blocker at instant speed, that can be a pretty useful thing as well. So I'd say this land does pretty well in the limited format. Probably sees play as about a 3, I would think. Generally just does make the cut. Wooded Ridgeline. And we have some basics. It has different art to show the effects of the invasion. So this is forest, island, mountain, plains, swamp, and 5 different versions of wastes. So this one is showing the influence of Thune, where it's creating a sort of nightmarish realm where reality ceases to make sense. This one could represent either Thune or the Far Realm, influencing the structures of reality. This is more like the wastes we saw in Wastes of Veldmar, where this is the result of their own wars and industry. This one definitely has the influence of Thune. So, Thune likes to make mazes and entrap people into nightmares. So, this sort of MC Escher-like landscape would be a nightmare realm of Thune. And this one definitely represents the Far Realm. So the Far Realm is just growth. It's like alien knowledge, unchecked chaos and growth and ambition. And it doesn't know when to stop. It just goes, and it's sort of this strange mutant life. So that rounds out the entire set, Defense of Veldmar. So, what did you think? Let me know in the comments. And I hope one day that you and I can sit down and play a draft or a constructed format with this set. A man can dream. So, please like and subscribe. Check out my other videos. I will continue to make cards on MTG Nexus. I'm already in the process of making the next set, the final set of the block. That'll be Growth of Veldmar. So, stay tuned. I'll also probably be covering Duskmourn on MTG Arena, so that'll be fun. I already said the stuff, so lastly, never stop honing your critical thinking and empathy.